Amazing. Okay, so the second thing that we're going to think about today is how much it costs to run your MVP business model, and therefore how much you're going to need to charge for it to turn a profit. Pricing is a really interesting exercise for a lot of people because money is a very, very subjective thing. Everybody has a different relationship with money, right? Just because you think that something sounds like the right price, or that something is cheap or affordable, or that something is expensive, it doesn't actually mean that your MVP is worth more or less than that. Okay. Everything needs to be priced by its actual value to the customer, balanced with its cost to you as the producer. This is how we can get beyond our own relationship with money and find out the reality of a price in the market. Okay. There's a few very important things that you want to consider when you're deciding your pricing. The first, most important, is the cost to you to produce the thing. These include your fixed costs. Fixed costs are expenses that will come in every month, regardless of whether or not you sell something. So for example, the rent and bills on your workspace, employee salaries, etc. And you also want to take into account your direct costs. Direct costs are expenses that you incur by providing the actual product or service. So by producing and delivering and selling that product or that service. For example, the supplies and materials that you used, the shipping costs to get it to your customer, the budget for that event, or whatever it is. So you want to include your fixed and your direct costs on the products that you're selling. The second thing when you're thinking about pricing, to think about your customers, the who. We always talk about this. Who is using this? What do your customers want from your products and your services? What part does price play in their purchase decision? Okay, how valuable are the features that you're offering to them? For example, if it's speedily delivered to their doorstep, are they willing to pay more for this convenience? And in that case, do you need to include delivery fees in your price? This information will help you determine if your price is right, what features you need to focus on offering, and lastly, if you're even targeting the right market at all. Because it might be that after exploring how much it actually costs you to provide that, you might need to reevaluate your target market to make your business more profitable. Okay. You also want to think about your positioning. So once you understand who your customer is, you can determine your positioning in the market. So where are you in the market? Are you the most expensive, most luxurious, high-end brand? Are you somewhere in the middle, just good quality, good service? Are you the cheapest, most affordable? You're beating everyone else by 10%. Where do you sit in comparison to the other people that are providing that service or that product? So that's another thing you want to think of is your competitors. What are your competitors charging for these similar products and services? What features are they offering for those prices? What are their selling points? And how does that help them justify their price? The answers to these types of questions are going to give you an industry benchmark. It's going to set a standard for your pricing. You want to price with the competition. If you're too low or too high, maybe something is a little off with your pricing. The most important thing at the end of the day, I'm sorry to say it, but one of the biggest things that businesses and owners, founders just like you, neglect to consider, neglect to ask themselves is, how much profit do I want to make? Okay. Sometimes they're looking at what others are charging and then pulling a figure out of thin air to be competitive without really thinking about how much profit they want and need. This is why we did our personal necessity budgets first. You might be in business for the passion of it. You might want to add value to the lives of others, and that is amazing, but you also need to add value to your own life. So give a careful consideration to what your time is worth and use your personal necessity budget to think about how much you really need. If you are a commercial business, in the end, each item that you sell needs to make you a profit. So you need to charge more than it costs you to make it, deliver it, market it, and sell it to your customer. If you are a not-for-profit, your model is going to look very different because you don't need to turn a profit. However, you still need to know how much each service you deliver costs you so that you can apply for adequate funding to cover the costs of what you do. If you don't know how much it costs you to provide your not-for-profit service, then how do you know how much money to ask for from your funders? So let's take a really simple look, okay? It's a very simple breakdown. First, you want to figure out your costs, and then you want to compare it to the revenue that you want from each item. So you calculate all those costs, you add them together. We're just pretending that each one is £1 here on that one product or that one service that you're selling. And then you decide your price. Like we talked about, you can try out different numbers here where it says item pricing. Try out a few. You might get some help deciding what price you'll charge from a competitor comparison. Maybe you collected data on your surveys during your test. Maybe you've been doing market research with Cobra or through the Social Enterprise and Business Center. Or you might add a margin. You might calculate your costs and then add a margin. That's what Maria said that she does. She says she just adds 20% to her costs. And that's how she determines her price. So you can do it a few different ways, but again, you're going to want to compare it to your competitors as well and make sure you're positioned right in the market. So price at £10, cost £6 to make. 10 minus 6, you're making £4 profit on this item. Okay. So we see here the gross profit margin per item, which it's important to note is not necessarily the money going into your pocket. Okay, because it doesn't necessarily account for certain overhead fees, what we call overhead fees. These are overall business fees, for example, accountancy fees, permits, licensing, etc. In the beginning, one of your biggest goals should be to keep your overhead costs as low as humanly possible so that the gross profit is as close to accurate as possible. Okay. To be honest with you, by calculating a gross margin, we are only scratching the surface of pricing, okay? We are barely dipping our toes in the water. This is simply the obvious cost and the obvious profit for one item. Eventually, as your business grows, you will have other costs associated with running it. You will have employees, you will have a premises, etc. And those costs will need to be calculated beyond the singular item that you sell. That will be called a net profit margin. But we're not going to get into that today because we're going to start with the basics. Keeping it simple, just like Maria told us, was the smart way to do it. For example, if one day you're going to rent an office, it's not just to store this one item, right? And if you're selling a lot of items, you're not going to break down the cost of your rent of your office into all of the different items that you make, okay? Eventually, you're going to want to take net costs, so all your overall costs for the business, and your net profit, so all your overall profit for the business, into account. But for today, like I said, we're going to start simple with the gross profit, okay? Let's use an example. Lucas is going to pop the link to this case study in the chat. So you can take a look yourself, but I'm also going to walk you through it here. This is a product example, and we're going to do a service example second, okay? So this is our friend Dottie. She is a seamstress and a designer. She loves working with upcycled, dead stock, and secondhand fabrics. Okay. This is really more of a side hustle project for Dottie. She's a crafter, she's a maker, so she has another job on the side. She just really enjoys being creative. She loves to make beautiful things out of fabric that would otherwise go to landfill. And she likes to make a little bit of pocket money on the side of her job. This is London after all. But she has not grown this business into a sustainable full-time job yet. Okay. So this is one product in Dottie's line. It's a dress pattern that she can replicate over and over using different secondhand fabrics. So not all the dresses look the same, but they're all shaped the same of this one product, same pattern. Let's look at her costs. So the money that Dottie has to spend to create one of these dress products, okay? So there are a few sewing materials consistent with the farmer metaphor from earlier. Yes, that is spelled sewing like a field. She's got a few sewing materials like thread, her tags for her dresses, etc. in this dress. But Dottie's really smart. She buys these materials in big bulk. So it keeps her cost per garment really, really low, only 30 cents. Oh, sorry. As you know, Dottie uses only secondhand fabrics, so they're sourced really cheaply, although they're actually pretty decent quality. But she figures out how to put small amounts all together into this really cool look. So she's actually saving a lot of money on her raw materials, which is really making this business possible, to be honest. Now, Dottie has been sewing a really long time, so it only takes her about 3 hours to sew this dress. She is very smart. She has allocated herself a London living wage salary. That's $10.85 an hour. I would highly advise you, if possible, to pay yourself a London living wage salary, because there's a reason why the word living is in that title. Because you want to live, you want to be alive. For the time she spent sewing, she's paying herself $10.85, okay, for 3 hours. That guarantees that if nothing else, at the end of the day, she's paid for her time just like she would be in any job, because we don't work for free, regardless of the profit margin that she's left with at the end, okay? She sells her dresses online, which means she needs to ship them to the customer, okay? These are her direct costs for this product. She needs to put it in a package, she needs to ship it, and she needs to put a flyer inside the package that thanks the customer for their purchase, has her contact information, her returns information if she takes returns, her social media handles so her customers know where they can follow her, and a coupon for 15% off their next purchase, because she's, again, smart cookie. She wants to incentivize the people that she already knows loves her work enough to pay her for it to come back and be a loyal customer. Dottie has thought a lot about her brand. She's thought a lot about her customers and what they need. So she pays a little bit more for that recycled packaging, because a lot of people who are interested in her upcycled fashion also love the planet and don't want to see excessive waste due to their consumerism. So she uses Etsy to sell because she hasn't invested in her own website yet. Again, this is just a side hustle. She hasn't had time. So she's paying the 5% Etsy fee that they charge for selling on their platform. And she's paying a 3% Etsy payments transaction fee on every sale. Okay. So this dress at the end of the day costs her about £47.35 to make. Dottie has chosen to charge 65 pounds for this handmade dress. She gets 65 pounds of revenue per dress, meaning that 65 pounds come into her business every time a dress is sold. Sorry, somebody I think unmuted themselves. Do you have a question? Cool. Dottie is going to subtract her costs from this revenue to see the amount that is left over. which is her gross profit. Her gross profit on one dress is £17.65. Okay. Her gross profit margin, so that's the percentage of her total revenue that is profit, is 27%. So 27% of every dress that she sells is her gross profit. Okay. Let's see how much profit Dottie is bringing in every month, not just on every dress. Okay. Dottie sells one dress on Etsy on average every 2 days that she works. Okay. Like we said, this is a side hustle. She doesn't work 7 days a week, every day of the month. She sells about 20 days of each month. Okay. So since she's selling 20 days and she's selling basically a half a dress a day, a dress every 2 days that she's selling about 10 dresses per month. Okay. 10 dresses sold at 65 pounds a dress. She's bringing in 650 pounds of revenue every month on dress sales. But it costs her, let's not forget our costs, £473.50 to produce these 10 dresses. Okay. So that means that at the end of the month, when she subtracts her costs for 10 dresses from her revenue from selling the 10 dresses, Dottie can expect a gross profit of £176.50 per month. The big question is how much of this money is going into Dottie's pocket every month from making these dresses. So her gross profit margin is technically 27% of her total revenue, but that's not how much is going in her pocket. Dottie probably has some overhead costs that are not completely accounted for in her pricing model. Okay. She pays an accountant every year to do her taxes. Sometimes she takes an embroidery course here and there to upskill herself and get some new qualification. Here and there, she goes to the art store and goes crazy, a little crazy over some ribbon. And she's got a little quite expensive ribbon that she bought here and there. It's okay. She's going to account for that in her overall financial plan. Okay. Let's take some liberties and assume that Dottie's pocket is seeing closer to about 150 pounds rather than 176 pounds after these unaccounted costs are subtracted. Okay. Let's assume 150. Thankfully, Dottie is very smart and she has lined her pockets already with 3 hours of sewing work in the price of every one of these 10 dresses. Okay. So she's made sure to pay herself over 325 pounds this month to make and sell and deliver these dresses. So overall, between her profit margin and her labor costs, Dottie is taking home 475 pounds a month from this side hustle. Okay, go Dottie. Of course, she's probably going to reinvest some of this money into her business to grow it. And maybe one day Dottie will want this to become a sustainable business. How might she build this? If she's interested in one day taking this business to the next level, I'm just curious, does anybody in this room, can anybody think of some options that Dottie has to decrease her costs and increase her gross profit margin? She's got to get creative. This is the fashion industry. Nobody said it was going to be easy. Any ideas?
Victoria had a hand.
Let's hear it.
I think you're on mute, Victoria.
Oh, you're muted, Victoria.
The obvious way to do it is you actually subcontract. You subcontract the actual labor, and you get other people to do it in bulk, and you increase your volume.
Definitely. So one way that she could do it is to reduce her production costs, because obviously her labor, her personal labor is in London. The London living wage is the highest cost here. So she could outsource. However, to be fair, we do know that Dottie is a crafty woman. She loves making these dresses. Really, the only reason why she's even doing this is because she is a maker and she identifies really with this maker stuff. Can anybody think of any other ways that she might? Because of course, if she really wants to make it sustainable, she probably will need to outsource it at some point. But are there any other ways that she might want to explore bringing in more money? Adrian?
Hey, so I guess she could look at other channels, whether there's lower commission or payment charges, whether there's any other payment options that would reduce those costs, whether there's anything she can do in terms of, I don't know, the postage, or as people have mentioned, kind of going at bulk on some of the items, and whether or not she, you know, what the impacts of her increasing her effort, looking at her marketing mix, seeing if she can drive more sales for the hours that she puts in, putting more time behind it, whether that could drive the volume, drive her revenue, whether she could look at her pricing to increase the price per unit and therefore bring in more revenue for the same number of units sold. Any of those kind of things.
Very good. Totally. There's a lot of different things that
Could she
go
also,
ahead.
sorry, could she also look at becoming a stockist on other websites rather than sort of doing it all herself? So actually stocking it on existing fashion websites?
Potentially, yeah. Sounds like a great idea. There's a lot of things Dottie could do to try to cut down her costs and up her pricing. I think someone mentioned marketing. One of the things she might be able to do right away is start marketing to build her brand reputation, maybe even to the point where she could charge more for a single dress because people want a dress made by her. There's a bunch of stuff she could do, but you know what? For now, Dottie's going to stick with her 500 quid a month. She's happy. Really quick. How does she know that 65 pounds is an appropriate amount of money to charge for this dress? She didn't pull that number out of nowhere. Okay. She's done her research with her competitors. She's looking at not H&M dresses. Okay. Cause she's not making an H&M dress. She's looking at handmade dresses. She's looking at the upcycled, designer, independent designer market out here. Okay. And she's seeing some people pay 80 for these dresses. Some people pay 50. So she's done her research and she's averaged it out, and she can see that she's priced in comparison at 97.5% with the rest of the competitors. So she's doing good on her price. She's positioned well in the market. So that's also included in the pricing tab of the financial planning tool. All right. Those of you who don't make products are like, girl, you have no idea how complicated my service provider situation is looking to me right now. Lucas is going to put a link to this sheet in the chat. This is Nathan. Okay. He is a service provider, just like some of you. He is an event producer. Okay. Nathan loves to bring people together and he wants to make it his livelihood. His dad was a meditation teacher. Okay. So he's been interested in the healing arts his entire life. Nathan has decided to start a gong meditation event for all these people here in London who are super stressed out and trying to get out of their everyday zone. Okay. Let's take a look at Nathan's costs. All in all, Nathan has calculated that it takes him about 12 hours total to organize this event. Okay. Again, he's paying himself a London living wage. Okay. Self-love, self-respect, the kind that only comes from years of meditation practice. He will be on site for 4 hours total producing this event. Okay. The event itself is an hour and a half, but he's added setup and takedown because he's really thought this through. Now, Nathan has done his networking. He's been doing this for a long time, and he's negotiated a good deal with a studio in his neighborhood, which is owned by someone who really believes in him and believes in what he's doing. Who knows? Maybe he had a really strong pitch that he practiced over and over, and he pitched this to this guy who owns the venue, and he was willing to give him a very sweet deal. He's renting the venue for only 3 hours total. Okay. Now, Nathan is not a gong healer himself. Okay. He's dabbled in sound healing in the past with his dad, but he wants to make this event really special, done by a real professional. He wants to sell it out. So he brings a really well-known gong healer who has a massive following for his work and who charges 120 pounds for 1.5 hours of sweet, sweet healing. Okay. Nathan knows that healing can be very exhausting, so he's doing the responsible thing and providing some light refreshments. Okay, he's got tea, he's got water, and of course, he's got some recyclable hot beverage cups that will please the hippies that are his customer base. He has to get to and from the venue as well, so that's 5 pounds of travel. He also accounts for the flyers that he will hand out to all his attendees to invite them to the next event with a discount. He wants to build a community that keeps coming back and selling out his events, right? So promotion is a really big part of his model, which means he needs to invest in it. And of course, he's got to pay those Eventbrite ticket fees to get people to be able to register and pay for his event. Okay, that's a 3.5 transaction fee and then 49 cents per ticket sold. Okay, all in all, it costs Nathan £491.30 to produce one gong meditation event. Spirituality, it's not free, you guys. Nathan has space for 30 people if he fills this venue. So if he charges 20 pounds per person, he can bring in 600 pounds of revenue for this event. Or maybe he decides to shoot for 20 people and he charges 30 pounds, whatever. He's got to look at his competition. How much does sound healing cost around here? Now, Nathan does have a deal with the venue. He does this event there. Oops, sorry, going back for a minute. So if his revenue is 600 pounds, but his costs were £491.30, his gross profit is £108.70. Okay, so 18% of the revenue is a profit. Let's look at it by the month. Nathan has a deal with his venue. He does this event 6 times a month. That means that he brings in 3,600 pounds a month of revenue by doing this 600 pound revenue 6 times. Okay. But these 6 events cost him £2,947.80 to run. Okay. So his gross profit each month for the 6 events that he produces is $652.20. Again, Nathan was really smart. He included his labor costs in his pricing. So over the month, he has already paid himself roughly 1,020 pounds for his hard work. Okay, that's 6 times 170 pounds, which is the cost of his production and the cost of the hours that he spends on site. Some of this money, so that's the gross profit plus his labor costs. He's basically pulling in 1,920 pounds per month. Okay, some of this money is his. Other stuff is going to be those overhead costs we were talking about that he needs to reinvest into his business. Okay, and he might be taking some of this 1,920 and purchasing more things to develop his business. Maybe he needs to build and maintain an amazing website for signups. Maybe he needs a little bit of soothing decor. He definitely needs those marketing costs besides just the flyers, because he's got to be filling out this venue every time. He needs new white linen pants. Every time he spills tea on his, he needs patchouli oil to spray all over the place. He needs a few things, overhead costs, okay? Now, Nathan's gonna need to make a choice at the end of the day, whether he's gonna shoot for the full capacity of the venue and really invest to be selling out the venue every time, or whether he wants to look at more complex ways to bring in revenue. For example, he can make tiered ticket levels where early birds are paying less, and then as the event gets closer, people are paying more, so that he ensures that he hits a certain number to pay himself out. He also might want to look at things like having Gong Meditation membership, so that he's guaranteeing himself a certain number of participants every time, but he charges them a little bit savings to access maybe all 6 courses in the month or something like that, or all 6 events in the month. So there's a few things that Nathan can do to ensure that he's selling out this venue each and every time and actually bringing in this revenue. Okay. We're going to try out pricing for our very own friends. It's the second tab in your financial planning tool. So yeah, so if it's a product range, obviously you need to break down your costs to create one product. Stick with just one product at first. If you have a few products in your MVP, maybe if you're food and beverage, for example, you've got like pizza, empanada, I don't know, whatever, like calzone, you have all the different things. Pick one and start with one. If it's a service that you're providing, you can use it the same way. So factoring in the different materials and elements you would need to provide that service and the time that it takes you to provide it as well. We're going to go out for 25 minutes. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Say there's a overhead cost like a sign that you'll reuse and reuse again and again, or an oven that you need to buy. Would you include those in these individual product pricings? And how would you do that if so?
I feel like that's pretty subjective. Like it would depend on the entrepreneur and sort of the volume of the amount of things that they were selling. Like maybe in the very beginning, they want to break down that price, or they want to include some breakdown of that into their overall price. Like for example, what Maria was saying, she adds 20% margin to her pricing just because she knows that there's things that she's not accounting for, like maybe some fabric cutting equipment that she had to purchase and stuff like that. But in terms of like big pieces of equipment, we are going to be including that stuff in our startup costs. So hopefully you would either use like savings or some funding to pay for that. But if you really wanted to include it, like you could add a little bit of a margin into your cost. So you could add 10 or 20% into your costs. And like if you knew that you had to buy a big piece of equipment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
But it would be totally up to the entrepreneur, and it would probably be the first thing to go if you felt like the price was becoming too high for the market.
Yep. Awesome.
Cool. Let's go out.